Hey everybody, it's Cameron here. I'm gonna wait to see if anybody jumps on here before I start talking. Let's see who we get. Come on, people. Let's see. I'm gonna be talking about real education. Oh, Rob, what's up, man? David, just waiting to see if people get on here. How's it going? Man, I wish everybody could talk. That would be pretty cool. Drake, what's up? Oh, we got a full house tonight. What's up? Hey, Rob. Woo! Gavin's at Avery's? Nice. Very cool. Oh, is Bitsia there too, huh? Man, so many things we could talk about. Whew. I've been watching the Alex Jones interview with Joe Rogan. And he talks about a lot of really cool stuff in there. If you haven't seen that, you really got to check it out. That the newest one, the one he did after his, deplatforming and all that stuff. He's talking about some really cool stuff. But it kind of got me looking at, education and everything, because I wrote a blog post today. If you go on my Facebook, it's like, I'm trying to remember what it was called. Something about education. Oh, the missing key in education. And in there, what I was looking at was the point of how with education, we're totally missing, in the education system anyways, and, pretty much everything that you would consider education in the mainstream or outside of the mainstream, is everything is going through the mind. And no one's really understanding the point about physical programming at all. And yet, the corporations, the media, and so forth, they all understand exactly how to program people to a point of perfection in terms of predictability of, behavior patterns, buying patterns, etc. So how is it that the education system just hasn't figured out how to educate someone to understand like algebra, like to a point of perfection? Does that really make sense? Does it really make sense that the people who can create like robots and artificial intelligence and all kinds of just amazing technologies like this iPhone I'm holding, and yet we can't figure out how to take an average child and program them so they can actually understand algebra and master it in a relatively short period of time? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And what it really comes down to is we have an education system that makes people feel like they're being educated, because it's like you're throwing all this stuff at them, like chemistry and math and biology and physics and history and literature and all this stuff. So it's like, okay, well, I'm being educated, but I just can't understand it. So it's just because I'm dumb, and and I try and everything. But at least someone tried. At least they tried to educate us. But the reality is, none of that stuff is actually being taught in a way that the person could understand it, really. Like anyone could understand it. Because it's all just being given to people to memorize. But we already know, if you read, for example, the 30 million word study or the book 30 Million Words, Building a Child's Brain, we already know that in the first 4 years, the child's vocabulary is basically complete. Like, the child may not be able to use all the vocabulary at that point, but it's already been programmed in through interaction with their parents. So by the time the child's 4 years old, they can predict how well that child's going to do in third grade. And yet the child doesn't really have a mind up until that point. So what does that imply? It implies that it's not the mind that's learning, it's the physical body. And yet in schools and in every education thing except TechnoTutor, this isn't being taken into account at all. Everything's being taught to the mind. The mind is just like a window. It's a window that you can put stuff through to go into the house, which is your physical body. And it's the window through which you can see what's in the physical body. So for example, if I say a certain word and you react, I can see how you're reacting based on that. Or you might have thoughts or feelings, so you can kind of see how you're responding and how words are programmed into you through your mind, which is your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions and all of that. But in itself, the mind is not where the information is stored. It's like trying to say that the information on a computer is stored on the computer screen. No, it's not. It's in the physical hard drive. And the education system is basically just trying to put a whole bunch of stuff on the computer screen for long enough that it can check to see it's there. And then once it's gone, it's gone. That's like taking a test in school. But if you really knew what you were doing, you'd be checking the hard drive. If you really understood education, and that's what we're doing, is we're realizing that the corporations, the media, and so forth, they are programming people through their minds into their physical bodies to respond, just so that they can make a profit. That's the only reason. They don't care. In fact, it's usually the most ruthless people who end up at the very top of these corporations, and all they really care about is just a little more money, a little more power, a little more control, right? And that's a dangerous drug once you get hooked on that kind of thing. That's why I know change in this world is not going to come from the top down. That approach we've tried that for since the beginning of human civilization, whenever that was, and it hasn't changed anything. And so it's time for people like us to stand up and step up. And it's not about revolution, because revolution just means to return. That's literally what the word means. So it's like going in a circle. That's not what we were here to do. We have to now step up, educate ourselves to a position of elite performance, a position of self-mastery. Because the elite, even in this world, are subject to their own programming. And if you study the Destiny material, this is one really cool thing about the Alex Jones video that they just did, the interview, because they were talking about how, Alex Jones says the elite believe that, they can take all these drugs, like DMT, and they can do all these weird, crazy stuff, and through that they can communicate with aliens and other dimensions and all this stuff. And the reality is none of that is real. What a human being is experiencing, even if you're on DMT and you think you're communicating with multidimensional beings and stuff, you're just experiencing something in your own mind. You've been inverted. Our consciousness is inverted so that we only seeing what is in us. It's kind of like, for example, imagine you had a computer that's hooked up to the internet. Okay, so let's say you have 1,000 computers and they're all hooked up to the internet. And then one day someone comes along and they figure out a way to unhook all the computers to the internet, but at the same time program onto the computers a sort of cloned copy of the internet that continues to grow and evolve. And so you can still interface with it, and there's new websites created every day. It's like what the internet would have been if it just kept going, but instead it's been just cloned and put onto that computer on a local drive. And so the person's never actually interfacing with the outside world. They're just interfacing with a programmed copy of the internet. So to them, it looks like they're still on the internet. They're still doing searches and watching videos and all kinds of stuff, but none of it is actually real. It's just a program. And that's what all these people are experiencing. They are experiencing a dimension in their mind where, from their perspective, it's like nothing's changed. But as you noticed, things aren't really working the way they thought they were going to work. Hillary Clinton did not get elected. I don't think that the elite thought that was going to happen. I think they thought she was going to win. It's like, hold on, I did all my child sacrifices. I did all of my prayers to Moloch. I did all of my DMT and chanting and all my whatever weird crap they do. They thought, hey, everything's going to work just like normal, but it didn't. And that's why you see it's like the media is on overdrive trying to demonize Trump and everything. I'm not saying the guy's perfect. I'm not saying he's the savior. He's not, because there is no savior. The reality is we're all responsible for what we accept and allow within ourselves. And it's like, now that computer, the internet has been cloned and put on that computer, and now you're just interacting with that. You have to now say, okay, this is actually my own creation. I am actually responsible from the beginning of time for creating this, and I have to now go through here, this entire vast web that's in my hard drive, and I have to figure out all the points that are causing me to act in ways that are not best for myself and everybody else. And nobody else is going to take responsibility for that. because it's not possible, man. Like, imagine even if there was one person who could go back and could go and reprogram all those computers, it would take them forever. But instead, if they just went and taught everybody how to reprogram their own computers, that would be a much more practical solution. And it's actually the only solution that would work anyways, because if we are responsible for creating this world because of what we accepted and allowed since the beginning of our existence, and this is just the manifestation of that, this is just the consequence and the outflow of everything that we've accepted from the very beginning, from that initial decision to not really stand within a point of just being here in reality. It's like we wanted something more, and maybe we just made a mistake, like we separated ourselves, we got afraid, and then we started blaming everything else as to why we were feeling afraid, and then we started competing, and it just has snowballed into this existence that we now call reality. So if that's the case, then if somebody else as a savior comes and fixes everything, but we haven't really changed within ourselves, then we just go right back to creating the same shit. So that can't be a solution. The savior doesn't make sense in any level. So somebody who's looking for a savior is really just saying they don't want to take responsibility for their lives. And that's kind of fucked up, man. It's really fucked up. So it's really cool though, because we have all these people now who have their kids in the education system, okay? And they think they're being educated. But in reality, the system is just making them feel like they're being educated when they're not. And if the parents are honest, you know that you don't remember anything you learned in high school or kindergarten or any of that shit. And yet you put your kids in the same system expecting them to learn something that you know you didn't learn from that system. So that doesn't make any sense. But parents will do it because the system says it's what they're supposed to do. So what are we going to do about that? Because we know that it's a distraction. We know that in reality, the real education is happening in the first 5 to 7 years, where the parent is basically just exposing the child to all of their patterns and to TV and to YouTube and all this shit now, which is even more crazy than it was when I was growing up. And so basically they're taking a newborn baby from the time it's born and programming it with all of the bullshit from within the parents, all of the dysfunctional behavior patterns and everything that's going on inside of the parent, and then exposing it to TV and advertising, and basically just letting the system, through the parent and also through advertising and media and so forth, program the child to be a perfect little slave consumer and install these programs physically in the child's body through words, through images, through sounds. And then the parent, when the kid's 6 or 7, sends them to school, or 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever, sends them to school, and then they think the child's going to be educated. They've already been educated. It's already done. It's over. Now, what the school system does is says, okay, who of this situation now has a really good memory, and who will basically just do whatever it takes to get a reward. And then it finds and filters those people out. And the really fucking smart ones, it puts them into fast track programs. By the time they're in high school, they're already getting recruited by like the CIA and shit. And the dumb kids, it's just like, well, you're fucked. You're just going to be basically like physical labor slaves. At the end of the day, everybody's coming out a slave. But, if your choices are be a slave that has a shitty life or be a slave that has a good life, most people are going to choose be a slave that has a good life. That's the reality of the situation we're in. So the slaves that have the good life won't challenge the slave system. In fact, they'll, tell on the slaves that are trying to run away. So there's not many of us who are like, look, I understand what's going on in this world, but I'm not going to accept it anymore. And I also know if you try to fight the system, that's not going to work either. So what do we have to do? We have to stand up. We have to support parents and children to actually educate themselves, to take back their own creative power and their creative ability, to program themselves, to educate themselves to a point where they're not able to be manipulated by the corporations and the politicians and all of that stuff. So they can see reality directly. So they can of their own accord, remove the filters that are causing them to just see life as a pursuit of happiness, as a pursuit of buying something so that I feel satisfied, so that I feel complete. The reality is we're already complete. We don't need anything other than our physical needs, and those are just consequences because of how far things have gotten. We don't really know what's possible if we were to walk back to the beginning of time and start over. Now we're in a position where we have physical bodies. We're separate from each other. Okay, can we solve that problem? No. Is it a problem worth solving? I don't know. But what do I know? Everybody needs to eat. Everybody needs water. Everybody needs certain basic things. And we're not making sure that everyone has them. That's fucked up. Like, there's people right now, they're spending like billions of dollars on creating like all kinds of crazy new technologies, while at the same time there's children starving. And you know, like, that makes no sense. Why haven't we figured that out? It's because people don't give a shit. That's the bottom line. They don't give a shit. The only people who give a shit are the ones who are in the position where their life sucks. But they're also brainwashed, so they're just trying to figure out how can they get into the position where they can basically abuse everyone else too. It's a total fucking nightmare system. The only way to solve this problem is to do it through education, where we provide people with the tools to actually change the fundamental starting point of how they see reality. And that means going back to the very beginning. It's the only way to do it. You know, it's really interesting with what we're doing here, Katie and I, with Max and Seneca. Max is not even 2.5 yet. He's 2 years and 4 months old. And I just got a text message from Katie today. He doesn't have to wear diapers when he's at home anymore, because he will go, and he has a little tiny, you know, kid toilet that's in, you know, the living room. He'll go, if he has to poop, he'll go sit on it and poop, and he won't even say anything to us. He doesn't even tell us he has to poop. He just goes and does it. If he has to pee, he'll go and pee in it. And when he's done, he will pick up the little, you know, bowl out of the seat, because it's, you know, you can take it out. He'll take it into the bathroom and dump it into the big toilet, and then go put it back on his potty. And it's like he doesn't even have to tell us. I've never seen anything like that before. And I had a little brother growing up who's 16 years younger than me. I mean, I helped, you know, play with him and, you know, sometimes change diapers or whatever, you know, did stuff like that. So I know what it's like being around a 2-year-old. And that's not normal. And we didn't train him to do any of that. Like, all we did was put into our techno-tutor all of the words around how to use the potty, and like potty and toilet and restroom and bathroom and, you know, pee and stuff like that, and poop and diaper and stuff like that. And then we would explain to him, here's how you pee in the toilet. Watch. Here's how you poop. Watch, I'm sitting on the toilet. I would always explain what I'm doing. Okay, we always just explain everything we're doing. And we would suggest to him, hey, if you need to pee, we're going to take your diaper off. If you need to pee, you can go pee in the potty. If you need help, just tell us. Sometimes he would pee on the rug or on the floor. And guess what? I wouldn't even say anything. I wouldn't get mad. I would just notice, and I would say, oh, did you pee on the floor? Okay, well, let me go clean it up. So I'd go get a cloth, and I would go clean it up. And then after a while, sometimes he would pee on the floor. He would just go over to the drawer where the cloths are, and he would just start wiping it up himself and not even say anything. Like, he's just doing it on his own, because he saw that's what we were doing. And Katie said today he went and used the toilet by himself several times, and then one time he was going to pee, and like before he could get to the toilet, he peed just a tiny little bit on the floor, just a little bit. And Katie noticed, and she said, "Oh, I think he said to her, 'Mom, I peed on the floor.'" And she said, "Oh, okay, just a little bit though, so not a big deal." And he goes, "I'm gonna clean it up." And then he went and got a cloth and cleaned it up. And I'm telling you, like, this is not like something we're making him do or telling him to do it. We would just do it ourselves and explain what we're doing. And because we're using our techno-tutor and the words are physically integrated, it's like he hears us in a total different way than a child would normally. Whereas normally the parent tries to like force in certain behaviors and things that they want. You know, I posted some really cool videos of like him looking at the clock. The other day, I mean, I wish I had this on camera. Probably no one's going to believe me. Katie, but you could ask Katie's mom, okay? She was over here. And we were sitting there, and we were in the living room. For those of you who've been in my house, you know, like I have this kitchen, and we have a clock on the wall, on one wall. And I was just trying to show Linda, because that's Katie's mom, I was trying to show her how Max can, you know, he knows all the numbers on the clock, and he can tell you, you know, the shorthand is pointing at this number. He knows which one's the short and the long hand, and so forth. And I just asked him, like, hey, Max, what time is it? And normally he would say, the shorthand's pointing at the 5, you know, this or that or whatever. And he looks at the clock, and like, before I could tell what time it was, he goes, 2:43. And I looked at the clock, and this is an analog clock with hands. It's not digital. There's no digital. And I looked at the clock, and I looked at Linda, and I looked back at the clock, and I looked at her again, and she was looking at me. And I was like, holy shit. And then I pulled out my phone, and it was 2:43. And I was like, how the hell did he do that? Because we haven't even taught him to multiply yet. How did he figure that out? And I was totally blown away. And is it possible that, you know, it was a coincidence, like there was a previous day where it was 2:43, and we said it was 2:43, and it was in the same configuration? Of course that's possible, but I mean, it was just such a weird, strong coincidence. I was like, wow. Even if that was a random guess, like that was just crazy. But regardless of that, it's like he'll look at the clock and he'll tell you the long hands between the 5 and the 6, and the short hands between the 2 and the 3. And I'll say, okay, so is the hour 5 or is it 2? And I'll say, is the hour 5? Because it's the long hand. And he'll say, Dad, the long hand's not the hour. The short hand's the hour. Like, he understands that. And he's, again, 2 years and 4 months old. This is not me trying to brag and be like, look, I have this genius kid. He's a normal kid. But we are educating him with words in the most effective possible way. That's what's producing this result. It's nothing else. You know, and you could say, well, Cameron and Katie are both really smart. Trust me, I wasn't that smart when I was that age. I was not that smart. What's up, Suki? You trying to go in? I'm going to let one of my dogs in. It's kind of cold outside. It's like literally freezing temperature in Houston. I don't know what's going on. It's all that global warming. But yeah. And the other thing too is, like, for those of you who've been here and seen Max, or you've seen the videos, you know, you can only capture so much on a video, especially with a kid, because they're spontaneous. And like, as soon as you pull up the camera, it's like, oh, you're filming me now. Now what? You know, so I have to ask again what he just did spontaneously. So you don't always see in the moment the spontaneity of some of the things that he does. And I know every parent wants to brag about their kid. I understand that. Let me put it this way, okay? I don't care about that. I don't care about bragging about my kid. That stuff doesn't matter to me. Okay? The only reason I'm talking about it is because people need to understand that this is a different way of educating your child. And it creates a different dynamic with the parent and the child. Where, now, I'm going to be honest with you though. You're going to have to, as a parent, change as well. You're going to have to really start questioning all of your programming. You're going to have to start looking at why you do certain things and why you say certain things, and those things that you say that you repeat as like a pattern. Why do you do that, and where did that come from? And that's what I'm really talking about, is real education. Like, where did those things come from? Where do all these thoughts and feelings and all this stuff come from? Why do you get excited about certain things and you get depressed about other things? Where do your feelings and your thoughts come from? I like to ask people that question. Your thoughts are not coming from you. You really have no idea where they're coming from. But you really got to figure it out, because if you don't, then, well, you're kind of fucked. Because it's like someone gave you a computer and they programmed it to do all kinds of things that you don't want it to do. And that is hurting yourself, and it's hurting other people, and it's creating the world that we have. And it's really easy to go into a point of like, well, what does it matter? I'm just here to live my life and so forth. But I'm telling you, you've been saying that lifetime after lifetime, time after time, and you keep coming back here and you keep experiencing the same shit. And when something bad happens in your life, you immediately start complaining. So you can act like, well, my life is fine and everything. Then don't ever fucking complain about anything. But even that's not good enough, because if you go and you actually go to other places in the world and you see suffering, real suffering that happens on a daily basis, not just in individuals and their own mental pain, but like actual real physical suffering, like children being kidnapped and like harmed and abused sexually and physically, starving, things like that. That's really happening in this world that you're a part of. And the fact that you would not want to do something about it, that's so fucked up. It's so fucked up that you wouldn't want to do something about it. And look, if it's a matter of you don't know what to do, that's different. That's why we're talking, right? If you don't know what to do but you want to do something, then you should send me a message and be like, hey, how can I help? What can I do? And I'll point you in the right direction. I will. But I see so much people just justifying the way things are. And they say like, well, it's their choice, or I worked hard for what I have and all this stuff. And it's like, no, you didn't. Because I'm sitting here the other day in a high rise, okay? These apartments are probably like $2 million, condos. And I'm sitting in the lobby with this kid that I'm working with. It's a client of mine. And they pay me about $250 an hour. And we're sitting there for about an hour. And while we're sitting there chatting, I'm helping him with some chemistry stuff that he's just not understanding what to do with it. And while we're sitting there for that hour, I see this woman mopping the floor and sweeping and doing all kinds of stuff, right? The whole time I'm there. And, I'm like looking at that going, I probably made 40 times. Well, is that right? 25 would be times 10. She probably made 10 or 15 bucks an hour. I don't know. So probably like 20 times what that person made. And she's working harder than me because I'm barely working. I'm just sitting there having a conversation. That's not hard. And why am I 20 times more valuable than that person? Just because... Why? Because of my vocabulary? Because I can sit and read a chemistry book and explain to someone what's in it? And this person can't? So literally because I have more language ability, I'm worth 20 times more than that person? So you can't fucking tell me, oh, well, she just needs to work harder. What, like scrub the floor harder and she's going to make 250 bucks an hour? Are you fucking delusional? That's the kind of shit that I deal with when I talk to people on Facebook, and they say stuff like that. And they're like, they just have to work hard and believe it's all going to work out. If that were the case, there wouldn't be any suffering on this planet. Trust me, it's not because people are not working hard. It's because they're not being educated properly. Our education system is not actually educating people. It's just filtering out the people who have good memories, like people like me, and it's rewarding them. My problem was I didn't really want to go along with shit. I didn't really want to fucking spend my time reading a math textbook when I was in high school. I wanted to be in my room, like playing my violin and listening to like music and shit. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. And, my brother got it really bad because I don't know why it worked out that way. But my parents fucking medicated the shit out of him. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. So I got lucky in that sense. But, and I've seen all these kids where their parents make lots of money. They're spending like $80,000 a year on their kids' private school. And the schools are telling them, oh, they have ADD and stuff. You need to medicate them. They call it medicating. They call it medicine. I got to take my focus medicine. And these kids are taking this fucking, basically it's like meth. And they're sitting there the whole time like, and they're like not listening. They can't listen because it's like, I really just want to be like cleaning or something, because like when you take that stuff, that's what it makes you feel like. It just makes you feel like cleaning your room, like really obsessively, like with a Q-tip in like the corner, of like the where the walls meet, or something like ridiculous. And they're calling that education. It's like you shouldn't have to chemically force somebody to read a book. Something is wrong. And as much as the unschooling people are fucking missing the point, they do get the point that you shouldn't force kids to do stuff. You should not force. And if you can't force, if you rule out force, that means you're gonna have to learn how to communicate. And that's the rule of, or that's the, not the rule, that's the way we do things at our house, is that we communicate. We explain things, explain what we're doing. And sometimes we find ourselves searching for the right words. Like, how do I explain, how do I explain how do you explain to a 2-year-old why you shouldn't pick all the flowers off the plants that you just bought without force, without punishment? Guess what? You're going to sometimes end up with a plant with no flowers on it, because all you can do is just explain. And at a certain point you realize, well, I bought this plant to go in the front yard so that other people would see it and, you know, our house would look nice. But my son wants to pull the flowers off because he really likes playing with the flowers. So what am I going to tell him? You can't do that because I want other people to look at my house, and why? So that they can feel a certain way about me, so I can feel a certain way about myself. Like, does that fucking matter? Now, that's just one example, man. You have to really learn how to communicate. And then within that, you have to start questioning yourself and saying, why am I doing the things I'm doing? Right? Why am I trying to control this person's, this little child's behavior? And at the same time, you have to say, yet I'm responsible to make sure that they are educated properly so that they can function as an adult with effectiveness in this world, and especially within the context of a world that doesn't give a shit about them, that's going to demand that they compete for survival. If you're smart like us, you'll build a real business that will make sure your children will never have to work a day in their fucking life. And for those of you who would justify and say, well, you know, you have to work and do all this stuff, you're a fucking idiot. You're like the slave on the plantation saying, no, these chains are to help me from blowing away in the wind. Like, no, they're there to keep you on the fucking plantation. That's the only point. So why you would want to condemn your child to that kind of life is stupid. You should be doing everything you can to put yourself in a position where your kids don't have to work so they can just be creative, but also instill in them an understanding of the value of life so that they're not just basically being creatives in the context of the system, which is just going to work for a corporation and using their creativity to help a corporation sell more fucking products, but to support them to really understand the value of life and to improve the balance of life and support the creation of a world that's best for everybody. And that's our whole purpose of educating our children, is to support them to be more effective than anyone else has ever been. So if it were to come down to a point of competition, there is no competition, but the starting point is a point of value. So our children realize that they're valuable. Every night, Max has someone there laying with him until he falls asleep. And every day when he wakes up, there's someone there. You know, we don't have babysitters. I get people all the time saying like, hey, I'll babysit for you, or hey, you should come out and do this. And we're like, well, no, we can't do that. Well, why don't you get a babysitter? No, we don't have babysitters. I don't trust anybody with my kids because trust me, I know how hard it is for me in terms of challenging myself and pushing myself and questioning myself and looking at my own internal programming. And I know that another person is not doing that. So there's no way I'm going to allow them to have an influence on Max or Seneca, because at the end of the day, I'm the one that's responsible. And if every parent considered things like that, they wouldn't be putting their kids in front of a TV. They wouldn't be putting their kids in front of, you know, just giving them an iPhone and letting them scroll through YouTube and shit, because you should see the stuff that's on there. You know, because I work with a lot of teenagers and younger kids, and I know what they're looking at on the internet because they tell me about it. And their parents are totally clueless. Like, they're telling me all the jokes that they have in school and the memes and stuff. And I'm like, parents have no clue, man. They have no fucking clue. They don't know how to relate to their kids. And they don't realize that their children are becoming worse versions of them, like more competitive, more nasty, more spiteful. And the world's becoming more competitive, more nasty, more spiteful. And no one seems to be doing anything about it because everybody's got their head down trying to survive. And it's the most bullshit thing that exists. Because think about it. How do you survive in a world where everyone dies? You can't. No one survives. Why are we acting like survival's so fucking important when nobody survives? But at the same time, it's not about being stupid and be like, well, I'll just walk off a cliff. No, just use common sense. Look at how the world works. You do have to have money in this current system to exist. So you have to earn money, but that doesn't mean you have to compromise. And maybe you can learn to compromise less. If you were to challenge the points within yourself, and this is what we've realized, is that actually the more that we challenge within ourselves and correct, the better things get. And so that's how I know that we can create a better world, because if everybody did that, things would get better. Things have gotten better in my life, in Katie's life, in our kids' lives, in every way possible. And then I start seeing how that affects other people and improves their lives. And I see them improving because of what I've done as just at least a point of support. And then I see them helping other people. And you see like, okay, if we can actually show people how to take responsibility for themselves and their thoughts and their feelings and really learn how to correct those things so that we're no longer dysfunctional. In other words, if we could all remove all of the fear that is within us, then we could actually trust each other. Everybody wants everyone else to be the first one. But I'm like, no, I'm not going to expect that. I'm just going to do it myself. I've already seen an example that it's possible. And so now I know I have no excuse. So that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. And it's been really a slow process a lot of times. It's been very hard. But then when I start seeing how I prepared myself and Katie's prepared herself, and then we have kids and we see how much better it is for our children, then it's like, damn, that's fucking worth it. Plus it's worth it for me because the whole idea of like terrible twos and all that shit, I'm like, that's not real. That is not real. That is some justification that parents use because they're basically just looking in a fucking mirror and seeing how terrible they are, but they're blaming it on their child, even though they're the primary fucking person responsible for how their child is. But again, parents don't understand that. They don't consider all the influences that they've allowed to be placed into their child. And then when the child reflects all that back, it's like invisible. It's like there's just their own person. No, they're not. They're just a conglomeration of everything you've allowed to influence them. You're responsible. So all we're doing is looking for people who say, you know what, I want to take responsibility. I don't know how, but I want to do it. And we're like, well, we know how to do it, and we're going to support you. And that's what real education is. Real education is 100% responsibility, no excuses. And at the end of the day, when you die, no excuse is going to be valid. And I know that about myself. No excuse is going to be valid. So we have to step up, and I have to do everything possible that I can within my awareness right now to be an example and to support myself and to support other people. Because the reality is we have everything on this planet to have total heaven on earth. It's just we have to, it's like Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within. So we got to change what's within, because that's the only way we're going to see that in the without, right? But you can't pretend like everything's great within and the without hasn't changed. If you just, well, I'm feeling happy and everything, that's called you're lying. It's not about being happy. You can't be happy until everybody's happy. And that was the first thing I realized. The very first Destiny video I saw, I realized, oh, that's why I've been unhappy, because the world is designed in such a way that no one's happy, because we're not giving that to each other. So that's why things have to change. That's why we have to change. That's why you have to learn about how to educate yourself for real and your children for real. It's the only way to create a better future. The children are not the future. We are the future. The children are just going to be copies of us. So if we don't change, they're just going to copy us, and it's going to be the same but worse, because the system's collapsing. It's going to become more competitive. Any final thoughts, Kate?
Oh, that was pretty cool.
Okay. My hand is falling off now. All right, everybody. See you later. Have a good one. Post some comments below. Give me some feedback. Bye.